Greetings and salutations. You are listening to the Into the North podcast, where we take a look at the competitive side of the Commander format, also known as CDH. I am one of your hosts, Lyndon, aka Noobzors, and today I'm joined by my co-hosts, Reed, aka Sick Robot.
Hey, how you doing?
And Morgan, aka Spleenface.
What's up, everyone?
And in this episode, we'll be covering how to build a local playgroup, which Morgan was saying we might have done an episode on before. Maybe we have, maybe we haven't. None of us remember. We're all getting old and senile, and we're getting close to 100 episodes now, which is, just fucking crazy. But
it probably should have happened like 3 years
that's
ago.
What I was going to say. It's
like
it's one of the
reasonable podcast schedule, but
it's one of those topics where it's how could we have got this far without talking about this? Which this could be honestly episode 1. Fuck man, maybe we started. This is at the new episode 1.
Season 2.
Season 2. Yeah. Before we get into that, what have you guys been up to since the last episode? Anything fun?
I'm not sure there has been much in relation to CDH I've been doing. Just talking to people about clams, some chatter.
I feel like I can provide maybe not a fully sufficient excuse, but at least something of an excuse for the delays, which is I've been moving.
Yeah.
Nice.
Extensive process.
And also Reed, it's not just a magic relay. I mean, the magic relay is the rest of the show. This you can say whatever else, whatever the
That's
fuck
true.
because you've been jamming Vintage Cube.
I have jammed a bit of Vintage Cube. I've played like 2 leagues of it so far.
Yeah, that's more Vintage Cube than I've played in like the past 2 years.
The actual answer is I played a lot of OTJ Limited.
Oh really?
Because reasons. I don't ask me why. I could not tell you. I just I feel like I just had an itch for some limited play, and there was no cube live on Magic Online, so I played OTJ instead.
How's limited in that sense?
It's actually pretty decent. It's a weird one because I'm not like an old head Magic player, but when I first got into Magic,
dude, we are old heads now.
No. Old heads for CDA, sure. Old heads for Magic, not at all.
Okay,
because I got into playing Magic at the LGS level, playing draft nights during Eldritch Moon, Kaladesh, Aether Revolt, and Amonkhet.
Yeah.
Sort of that block. And even then, the differences between modern set design for limited and even set design at that point, which at the time was considered, I don't know, it sort of felt like it was this is sort of a new thing. A lot of the stuff that they're doing, these are sort of sets that are structured in different ways, and they stop doing the 2 set blocks, and then that changes how limited works and all that kind of stuff. But dude, modern set design for limited is just crazy because it's still good. I enjoyed playing it. It's just every card is cracked. You don't play
Yeah.
When I started playing Magic, you play limited, and I'm still I'm playing 2 mana 2/2s, vanillas, right?
Yeah.
I'm playing. There's a bunch of stuff in my decks where I'm just
it's a 3/1 for 2, and you're how is this in this set? You're listening to limited resources, and they're in this set is actually pretty good to have this kind of thing. That's just a good body, and then now it's
but even then you're just oh no, I just actually need filler for my deck, and this is the best stat line available at cost, right? I'm playing 3 mana 2/2 flyers at the time, right? I'm playing literal Windrake in my deck because it's actually no, it's oh yeah, I'm playing blue white flyers. This is just a decent body to have around. Whereas in this set, I'm building decks where it's even the filler is just oh yeah, so this has 2 separate abilities, and it's synergizes directly with this archetype that you're playing with, and it can get to be it's a common, but it can get to be a really big threat as a 3-drop if you get all this stuff working together, and it's just what happened? Where are we?
The last standard set that I played limited with was actually I played a fair bit in the March of the Machines artifact block. That was actually that
was also very fun.
I really enjoyed that block, and I said at the time, I feel like I said it on the podcast, I might have just said it in when we were hanging out one time, was I think this set will be or this block will be remembered very fondly, in terms of both limited and kind of I guess mostly I was talking about limited, but it just had every set in that block had a very unique spin on Phyrexians and
stuff,
artifacts, like because there's like artifact blocks historically have been you know, kind of busted, and I think it's very easy to get samey when you're building in that kind of theme.
Oh yeah, for sure.
They really mix it up with mechanics. Every set had like a really cool feel. You know, as much as it's fun to rag on wizards for breaking magic and, you know, power creep and all this stuff, it's on and the pace at which they're doing all of these sets and spoilers and all that. It is, I think Magic is a much better product like now than it was in the past, for sure. Like I think it's
for sure.
hard to argue against that.
I mean, the like sort of on that, if like for Phyrexia All will be one sort of like same like same sort of, what can you call it, a block? I don't know.
Well, it was All will be
it's
one.
Like, it's like sort of a block, right? It's like All be one, Mom,
Brothers War,
and then Brothers War. No, it was Brothers War.
Whatever. It was those were the sets in the block,
I didn't play
right?
anyway. Yeah, but like it was a really cool moment for me when I was like at the pre-release for All Be One, and I hadn't like looked at, like, you know, I follow the rares as any CDH player does. Like I follow the spoiler channel that other people post to. I didn't do like a whole lot of like tracking down spoilers or like looking at the actual full set before playing. Mm-hmm. It was a really cool moment when I opened the I think like 2 of the Seed Core in my pre-release pack, which is the one that taps for a mana of any color, but you can only use it to cast Phyrexians.
Oh, and I was like, it's like the one that makes tokens.
No, it's the one that pumps 1/1s.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
It's a, what's it called? It's a Pendlehaven. Mm-hmm. But it taps for a mana of any color for only Phyrexian spells. And I was like, this is pretty cool, but I guess I have to like be playing the Phyrexian deck for it. And I'm like, yeah, okay, well, like that's fine. And then I had the realization when looking through my pool, I was like, oh, literally every creature in this set is a Phyrexian.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's sick. That's okay. This is like very cool. All right, neat. And I just feel like they've been doing like some pretty interesting stuff with set design. Because I was like, for one of the, I did want to say, for like one of the decks that I ended up getting together and 3-0ing with in OTJ was just like 6 synergy deck that like I've never come close to having that much like awesome pop-off potential in a limited deck before, like especially like a draft deck in a standard format, where I had what are they called? I had so I had the Kervik, which is the one where you commit a crime and then you can cast a black card from your graveyard.
Okay, yeah.
Or like you cast a copy of a black card from your graveyard. It's awesome design, but I had that, and I had like 3 Hollow Marauders in the deck as well, which is it's like a 7-drop, but it discounts by 1 for each creature card in your graveyard. It's a 4/2 with flying, and when it ETBs, your target opponent discards a card, and then if it wasn't CMC like 4 or 5 or greater or something like that, you draw a card.
Whoa.
And I had a game, I had multiple games actually, where I cast a Kervik, and I'd already gone through 2 of the Hollow Marauders in the deck, and I went, great, Kervik, Hollow Marauder out of my hand, commit a crime, cast another Hollow Marauder out of my graveyard, commit another crime, cast another Hollow Marauder out of my graveyard, commit another crime, cast a removal spell, you die, because I cast like 3 4/2s, drew 3 cards, you discarded your entire hand, and like we're just like moving. And I was just like, this is like the most synergy I've like ever had in a limited deck before. And like there are a couple of decks like that where it's just like, oh, I'm just like doing sick stuff and just like putting together like deck. I had a deck where I ended up drafting Cruel Ultimatum Grixis, because there's a Cruel Ultimatum in one of the alt sets that you can open. Mm-hmm. And I had it with like 2 of like the Snapcaster mages that you can open with like a bunch of removal spells and stuff. And I was just like, I had one game where I cast a Cruel Ultimatum twice in one game, and I was just like, this is like this is sick for like a standard set. Yeah. Like I might expect to be doing this kind of thing in like a Modern Horizons or like a Modern Masters set or something, but this is great.
So long story short, Reed just likes bullying people.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And Wizards encourages it.
Correct.
But it's funny because recently I was thinking, like, I'm sure everyone had the thought being like, at some point in their Magic careers, if you've been doing it for a while, of like, I wonder what it'd be like to be a Magic card designer, or, you know, something like that. And it used to be, I was like, oh, you know, I'm sure I could do, you know, design this card, you know, for a commander set better. Like recently, I feel like WotC's been doing a really good job of designing these. Like, I mean, we've talked about it before with like the Commander precons and stuff, but I just look at these sets and the frequency that they come out and like the novelty, which I think is the really the hardest part to kind of get, is just like Magic is how many
different.
years in, right?
Yeah.
Like how many things have, you know, I mean, everything is just kicker, but like even still, like committing crimes and that kind of interaction, it's like that's kind of a just completely new axis, right? Like nothing, or it's like there's maybe stuff that's like sort of similar.
I have thoughts about the limited format. Great, the gameplay is awesome. I have thoughts about the choice of using commit a crime as a design space, but I guess I don't know if we have time to get into it.
Yeah, we'll save it for another day. But I just want to say, like, it's I could only imagine how stressful that'd be to work as a set designer or card designer.
New stuff,
and then like, and they do it with like a pretty consistent quality level, and like it really seems like they're not dropping the ball really. And so like, yeah, just, you know, shout out Wizards and whoever, all the super stressed people who are doing card design and stuff.
Yep.
You guys are killing it. Yeah, so I guess that was our what you've been up to since last episode. Yeah, without further ado, we normally jump into housekeeping and new developments, but we don't really have any of those. So we're going to jump right into the main topic, which, again, building local playgroups. So we're kind of going to break this down. We've got like a why, a how, that's the major categories, but like, let's start with why. Why put in energy, effort to build a local playgroup?
Well, you want to play CDH, presumably.
Yeah, but you know, the online
one.
community, I can play with, get all these spell table games, or Cockatrice if you're lame.
Cockatrice if you're based and want to play on the superior platform. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the CDH community started out of necessity through online, right? I mean,
yeah,
I guess,
it's just a small enough community that you can't really like. I mean, there were like IRL play groups, but like it.
Shout out QMTG.
You know, well, I was thinking like, you know, the progenitor of all of it in Boston, right? Like the Boston play group actually like existed IRL, and then it sort of spread out. Like I feel like primarily online because people like started.
Oh yeah, well,
sort of
I mean,
hearing
the
about it, or, like,
first
doing the similar
CDH
thing,
was
and then-
all. I mean, it started in person, but then it became like
Yeah.
there were small, sparse. You know, there was the Finnish meta. You know, there was QMTG.
Yeah.
There was, you know, New York. Like there was a bunch of small like individual playgroups where it's like maybe you can get a couple pods, right? But it was out of necessity. It was like online because that's how you were going to get games, right?
But this actually is not something that I've thought about necessarily before, but it's also sort of interesting because I feel like part of the reason why I ended up being primarily online as well, over like, you know, like, instead of like, EDH in general, like exploding online mostly, is that I feel like there's sort of like a difference in mindset of people who would want to play competitive EDH, like from the start, without like the context that we have around it now, right? With like, you know, all of the people like pushing for it, and like there's just so much out there about like getting into the format and like pushing for interest. But like at the time, if you're seeking out a competitive experience for like what is historically a casual or social format, it sort of makes sense that you would have like a higher proclivity to then like look online for games, because like you might not be satisfied with your local playgroup necessarily, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think
Where you're like, oh, I want to try playing against like people with like other deck, like what other like people's like decks look like for this kind of stuff, and like what are they doing that's like really powerful, and like it doesn't look the same as like what I'm doing, and like, oh, I want to see if like I can beat them with what I'm doing, right?
Well, I think honestly the real pipeline is that it wasn't people going into the online spaces to get games. I think the games almost were secondary to the community aspect and the information. It's like, well, you know, I want to learn how to make this deck the best, or, you know, I want to, you know, try and level up my deck, and, you know, the traditional kind of EDH arms race. And then there was CDH where, you know, all the information community were organized online, and that kind of like repository of information. And then from there, it's like, well, if we're all together and I can't get these kinds of games in my local play group, maybe we should just play. And then, you know, you got the r/server with all the cockatrice games, and then you know, with PlayDH started with the games over Zoom that then became like CDH Nexus, and then, you know, obviously it was really cool. I don't know, Morgan, you remember with like pre-pandemic, like all the different experimentation with because this was before Spell Table, right? Spell Table has made things so much easier for getting web, like even you know, Cockatrice made a lot of sense when people, you know, there wasn't like a established way to play webcam Magic, but you know, trying to figure that out, being like, okay, so then I think it was like Timothy 1000 had like his the Zoom rooms that he paid for or something that we'd play on.
No, it was GoToMeeting.
Oh, GoToMeeting. Yeah.
Yeah, Hamachi, right? Yeah.
Well, and then there was it renamed. There was like an online one that was free, like it was just a web page. Whereby? Something like that.
Yeah.
And then it was like, oh, this sucks, especially for people with like bad internet connections. So then, yeah, like different servers explored different. I think Nexus worked out a deal with GoToMeeting to get like a bunch of rooms for some rate. Yeah, it was a wild time.
You had to coordinate with other people who were also on Nexus to like use a room that people weren't already using.
Yeah, it's really cool to look back on that and be like, man, this was before the pandemic, and then really kind of set things up. You know, obviously when the pandemic happened and kind of disrupted a lot of these, you know, local playgroups where everyone was playing Magic in person. A lot of people in the CDH community were already, it's like, man, there's almost zero disruption to how I'm playing Magic because I'm already playing Magic online and webcam. And, you know, in fact, things actually got better because of the advent of Spell Table and the like. So, yeah, it's, I think that's kind of where it came from. But then, you know, as we've been seeing post-pandemic, CDH grew immensely over the pandemic. And then now it really is, you can go to most LGSs and there'll be CDH players there enough to get like a pod, or there might be people who
maybe not most, but like it's definitely a much higher. Like
true.
in any given like relatively large, like, or like in any given like city or like relatively large, you know, like, I don't,
densely
town
populated,
or like, you know, like
area.
Yeah, densely populated area. It's not unreasonable to be able to find a CDH play group.
Well, and the thing is that, and this is part of what we're going to be talking about, is that CDH players, they tend to exist online in these spaces, but these spaces aren't geography based, right? I mean, some of them you might have like a Toronto CDH Discord, or, you know, Boston or California or whatever. But they're not like, you know, specific to your city necessarily. And the odds that you have someone who might be, you know, a lurker in the CDH community, or have thought about making a CDH deck, but they're like, well, but I don't know anyone around me who plays CDH, so maybe I'm not going to do it. Like, those people are out there in a lot of your communities, and you need to do a bit of legwork to find them and bring them together, because then you can actually get your local CDH play group and, you know, hopefully grow the community. In your local community, get that started. So,
for sure.
Yes. Why build a local play group? Well, we've got a couple reasons. Playing Magic with people in real life, IRL, face to face, is fun.
Yep, much different experience.
Yeah, Magic is a social game. Commander even more so, right? It thrives on, you know, local game stores. That's kind of the bread and butter of it, and, you know, getting out to meet people, get some face-to-face interaction. It's I mean, we all felt that lack of that during the pandemic, and you know, how nice it was to start meeting people again. So, you know, if you can, if you're right now primarily an online CDH player and you're looking to get something started in your community, it's fucking worth it, man.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, also part of this is just CEDH is fun, right? And I think even more so when you're playing it in person.
We're not at the hot takes episode yet.
It's not even necessarily about playing in person. I mean, the playing in person is like a good part of it, but also it's the combination of playing in person and playing with like a curated play group of like, not like, I'm not talking curated decks or like curated meta. I'm talking like with a curated group of people, or like a group of people that like you consistently play with. Maybe not necessarily curated, but like just with a group of people that like you consistently play with and that you're comfortable playing with a bunch, because it really, like, sort of, again, it's still a social game, and it gets way more fun when you just feel like at home or like in place when you're playing in a game versus having to, like feeling out people at the table, or like, just like with any like social situation, right? It's just like it's better
with friends,
be around friends, right?
Yeah.
Than to be with like people who you don't necessarily know.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, which, I mean, getting to it is making friends, that's if you're consistently just doing the same activity, meeting up, once a week, once a month, whatever it is, you get familiar with people, you learn their stories, you learn their personalities, you get close, you get food, you get drinks, you just make friends. And, I mean, I think you can, this is one thing that I think is really, awesome about Magic, is it is just so great for that specifically, right? How many friends or lifelong friends have you guys made from Magic, Tons.
Like one. You guys could guess who it is on this podcast.
Oh, at least it's one of us. Okay.
Yeah. It's one of you guys. Now fight.
But yeah, no, it's I mean, every community, and I mean, Reed, you can talk about this with like Smash community, and Morgan, I'm sure you've got like
just a bunch of communities in general, right? Like it's just
it's
better.
Magic feels almost like, I mean, to the other like hobby communities I've seen, it feels like almost a tier. Oh, well, maybe this is going to be controversial. Like a tier above in terms of like making friends and connections with people. I think it's just, I mean, I guess there's other things like Warhammer and like you're saying Smash. It just feels way easier to do that with Magic. You get like tons of different people, lots of different backgrounds, demographics. It's just, really, really good thing. And, making more friends is always good. So, yeah.
Okay, again, let's save the hot takes.
And then lastly, I have here is it's good for supporting local business.
It's great for supporting, especially if you're in a smaller city or like a smaller like urban area where it's you might only have one or two LGSs in the entire area. It's super important for them to have like consistent events and consistent play groups and people coming out, and it's a win-win, right? You get to have a third space, I guess is the trendy word for it, but you get to have a space where you can just go hang out and be yourself, even if it's not necessarily a day where you're playing CDH, and then they get to, stay in business and like make a living off of providing people joy.
Well, here's the thing, is like when, I think, I mean, maybe not necessarily everyone, but lots of people can think to times when they've been somewhere where there's, for maybe an extended period of time, and they're like, man, I've got the itch for some Magic, and you're looking up local game stores, and it's like really far away, and you're like, man, I wish my city had a game store. Like I remember it used to be in my hometown, there was like, when I first started playing Magic, I remember looking into like game stores around here, and there was one, but like they were primarily a comic book store and like game store second. And I just remember thinking like, man, I really wish we had something here. And, it's kind of sucks that I have to travel far to get to an LGS. And so don't take your LGS for granted. If you're a Magic player, you're, it could be Warhammer or whatever. Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, they just go to your game store, give them the business, and keep that community alive. Because, you know, if they can't sustain it, they will close up shop, and then you will really feel the lack of that kind of space, having to travel really far to find another space like that. So yeah, support local business. I think that kind of about covers the why. I mean, I've got a last point, which was you can curate your ideal meta if you're really driving the local playgroup and CDH scene.
If there are just
Alright,
decks that
wait,
you
no,
hate.
no, you can't give away our secrets like that, man.
You know, you hate partners, you hate 5-color, you know, you get to...
Is it even a secret anymore, Morgan? Apparently everybody knows that we just only exist to push our own ideas of what the CDH meta should be. And
So
to
true.
push
We hate innovation.
Thrasios Timna propaganda and just make people play dead decks because it's entertaining to watch them fail, I guess. I don't know. I ran out of the reasons.
Yeah. Do you guys have anything to add?
No, I think that's a pretty good
Pretty good list.
pretty good
Summary.
stating of pretty good list of the whys.
So then, Reed, we've got the next section, which is like the end goal. You know, what is the end game here? So I'll let you cover that one.
I don't think you have to lock in any of this at the start, but I think it's something to consider, especially if you're thinking about like starting up a play group or just like getting people together to play CDH on a more consistent basis with like a wider range of people is sort of what you actually want out of it. And everybody can want different stuff, but like I feel like the big two things that people want out of CDH, or I don't know, like the two things that I see come up a lot with people building local play groups are either just wanting to play like CDH the format, because CDH the format is cool and it's really fun and it's interesting and it's just like the hot thing right now, and you just want to play the format, which is very reasonable. Or if you are playing CDH because you want to be playing at like a high level of play in EDH, or you want to like you're an optimizer or like you want there to be like maybe you have like a high power EDH scene already in your city, and you just want to be like, oh well, I want to like try to push this like even farther and like maybe like bring people out to tournaments with me, or like you want to get into the tournament scene because there's like actually a CDH tournament scene now that you can get into. And I think it's sort of worth like thinking through what your motivations on these fronts are, just because it affects later down the line, like what you might want to, like some of the things that you might want to prioritize when putting together a local play group. For example, if you just want people to show up and like play CDH, I think it's like very reasonable to just start having like a weekly or semi-weekly or whatever game night somewhere and just pull people in from wherever. Like you see somebody, like some other people playing EDH at the store, you may offer them like, hey, you want to just like play, like we have some like high power decks sitting around, you want to like borrow one, we'll just like play some CDH because we think the format's really cool and we just want to like play and hang out with people. Whereas like for, if you want to be trying to like mentor people or like try to like up the level of play or whatever, you might like that's still reasonable to just like pull people in from EDH night. You should absolutely see if people are interested anyway, but you might just like want to try to curate like the pods more, right? Or you might want to have like more like actual like discussion, or like open up a group chat, get people more involved in like, hey, like I'm trying to optimize this deck, can we like talk about what people think are like good ideas, can we like sort of discuss the format a bit more in that sense. I think just consider what you want out of it is sort of like my point here.
Mm-hmm. That's good. That's very good. So I think it's, this is going to be the bulk of the episode, which is how. And this is really kind of boiled down to advice for community building in general. I mean, you could extrapolate this beyond Magic. And, this could be any hobby, or, it could be board games, could be, legitimately anything, D&D. So it's just kind of some, pretty general advice, but I think it's really sound and something that you should consider if you're, pretty determined to get the ball rolling here. So I'm gonna kick this off to Morgan because he hasn't been speaking too much. He's been coming in with some, witty, chiming in with some witty comments. Quips. Yeah, but
take it on the Matt roll for this episode.
Yeah. So Morgan, as someone who was president of the Queen's Magic Club, you've got some experience in kind of leading a local group. What do you think are some important things? Do you want to pick anything from this list to cover?
Sure. I think sort of the first thing that you really want to do is just have like a good attitude. Again, you don't have to be like best friends with everyone you play with, but hopefully you should become friends with some of the people you play with, and that's a lot easier when you're like a pleasant person to be around and when you're welcoming, and like just make the space that you're trying to build a space that people want to join. And like, that doesn't mean you can't like, rib people or banter or whatever. But just be aware, particularly when, you have like new people, that they might not sort of be used to it or be in on, the jokes or whatever. And, try and sort of tone it down, be welcoming, invite people to join. If people are, behaving in ways that are driving other people off, like maybe talk to them. You don't have to make it like a huge deal, but just, pull them aside quietly after a meetup and be like, hey, just try and be a little more welcoming. And I think particularly with CEDH, if you want to build a group of people who play well, is and this is sort of a tough line to walk. Each person has to sort of find what works with them and the people they're talking with, is like find a way to give constructive feedback that will be received well.
No, yeah, some really really good points there. And to in terms of like being welcoming in an LGS, I mean, lots of LGSs have EDH nights that are just packed, right? And if you are able to get people together for a pod of CDH, you are probably like a pod, one of the like 7 or 10 pods going on, and you don't want to give off the air that like oh, that's the CDH pod, those guys are a bunch of jerks, or they're like, you want people to look around and be like, man, those guys look like they're having a really fun time, I'd love to play with them, right? You don't want to have like a snobby elitist kind of attitude. And I think that's I mean, there's some people who might have that. I think that may be a bit of a reputation that some CDH players or community has, which I think has just been falsely attributed to the CDH community. A lot of CDH players are they generally want people to join. I mean, that's part of why the community is so proxy friendly. It's like really reducing all barriers to getting people to play. So because we just historically there hasn't been enough people to play with, so it's like, oh, you're showing interest in CDH, we'll bend over backwards to have you come play with us because we just want more people to actually get games in, right? So really try and put out that kind of energy to other people, and so then they'll see it, and it's kind of infectious. People are like, man, those guys are having a lot of fun. Well, let me see what they're doing. Or the casual. It's when someone walks into the LGS, all the pods look full, and they do the kind of like casual walk around to each table. They see what's going on, right? You get to demo a bit of what you're like. It's like, oh, this is what my deck is doing. This is what the format is like. You can use that as an opportunity to be like, oh, hey, like.
Do the sales pitch.
Exactly,
do the
right?
elevator pitch for CDH, yeah.
Yeah, you're like, oh, do you want to see what my commander does? Oh, you want to see my hand? Check out this card. I'm about to do something really cool. Or like explain a bit of what's going on. Really, be welcoming, and you can sell the format, sell CDH, and one thing that we have under the.
So I was gonna say that's definitely one that like I feel like took me a while to learn is like actively like seek to engage, because like people will be curious, they'll come up and just like sit and watch and just be like, hey, you know, like, do you have questions? You just like, you know, if you notice one of those, like, you've acquired a spectator, just like,
Yeah.
it's pretty easy to engage them. If you have extra decks, you can be like, hey, if you want to join us for next game, you can give it a try.
Give them some probing
but don't
questions.
just-
Hey, have you ever heard of CDH? You know, oh, what do you know about CDH? What kind of decks have you heard about? You know, have you ever thought about building a deck? What, you know, oh, what decks do you play right now? Just kind of generally just engage people and, you know, ask them questions, and, you know, it's really kind of easy and natural once you, you know, get that started. But well, you know, a couple other things in this good attitude category that I want to hit on before we move on is don't be a meta deck snob, which I think this is something that, you know, there are lots of things that are attributed to the CDH community that I think are done so erroneously, like that aren't. It's like, oh, you know, CDH players, they're all super competitive. They don't know how to have a good time, or, you know, it's no politics. So, which is kind of funny. There was like a movement of CDH. There's no politics in CDH. To then there's like too much politics in CDH. But there's these, you know, things that get attributed to us. But I think one that might be a bit of a problem with the community right now is a bit of the meta deck snobbery. Especially as it pertains to like the online discourse with like tournaments and stuff, like, oh, this deck isn't CDH, this deck is bad, blah blah blah. And, you know, I mean, honestly, there is a difference between a high power deck and a CDH deck. Most players will kind of acknowledge that, but, you know, if you're not playing one of the 10, you know, top tournament decks, doesn't mean you're not playing CDH. And don't try and it's just a really bad look to someone, you know, puts their bunch of energy and time and maybe even money into building a deck, you know, or they saw a deck online that, you know, someone was like CDH blah blah blah, and like, oh, I really want to do this, or this was like my casual deck I was playing before, like I tuned it up to the best of my ability, I saw some CDH primer, I read everything, and then, you know, they pull it out at the table and someone's like, oh, you're playing that? That's not really CDH, or like ribbing them in kind of a way that, you know, can be done in a, you know, we do this within our own play group with people we've been playing with for years. And we, you know, we'll rib each other based off their deck choices. Like, you know, you're playing that. Is that really even CDH? And it's kind of, you know, done in a joking way. But just, you know, have a bit of social awareness and realize that you don't make jokes in general that are like you'd only do for like a super close friend who kind of knows that you're joking with someone you've just met. You know, don't be a little too familiar with someone, you know.
You know, just good advice in general.
Yeah,
I feel like a lot of what we're going to end up talking about this episode is just like, you know, just decent social decorum for the socially uninitiated, aka like just every Magic player on the planet.
Don't be overly salty. Yeah, kind of like be a model for the good attitude that you want in your play group. Yeah.
I also wanted to say, sort of, I know we're a bit off of it as well, but like I did want to just get a quick recommendation in as well. Morgan was talking earlier about, you know, going about like recommending the right way in terms of like talking about potential like better play patterns or like addressing that kind of stuff. I think a really good idea that like I personally like a lot, and I actually like Lyndon and Morgan can confirm I do this a fair amount even in our play group, like our private play group, is just that like after a game, just have a quick chat about, and like not even necessarily like pointed or directed at any specific play during the game, just have a chat about like what some interesting decision points were during the game and what could have been like what different decisions could have been made, if those decisions might have been better, if they might have been worse, how things might have gone differently, just that kind of stuff, because it's a really good way to both just get people more involved in just sort of like looking maybe just like generally improving, even if you're not trying to get up to like a super high level of play, just, like discuss that kind of stuff. And then you can also sort of soft work in, without being targeted or pointed about a lot of stuff, just try to address maybe issues if like somebody is like consistently making plays that sort of reduce the quality of games, because maybe they're just like, consistently throwing games to like one specific person because of a play pattern they go through a lot. You don't necessarily have to call them out directly for it, but just like that, having that style of or like having that be like normal, and that being like just a consistent thing that you just do anyway, just talking about plays that were made in the game that you just played, really helps like sort of get rid of a lot of the sort of like social awkwardness, or a lot of the a lot of the like what might feel like an attack on like the person if you were to like like call them out for like, oh, like you made X bad play, you shouldn't do that anymore. That's a lot harder. Like that's a lot worse of a way to go around it, in my opinion, than it is to just like have a culture where we just talk about these things anyway after every game.
Another thing I just kind of jumped in to my mind is like make it very much a learning environment. Like if you're playing games casually, people are there to have fun primarily, and everyone's there to maybe not everyone's there to get better, but like don't I'd be very pro having like take backs as a like don't hold people to, oh, you did that play. No, you have to stick
absolutely.
to it, blah blah blah. It's like, oh, hey, we got into this situation where this maybe isn't the optimal thing or whatever, or like I was like, I should have done this instead.
You didn't know how this worked. Yeah, like, or like, oh no, I didn't really get what was happening here. It's like, oh yeah, no.
Oh, there was an onboard op agent. You went for a fetch. It's like, oh no, take that back, man. Like it's the thing is, and I think most CDH players kind of naturally have this mentality, which is we want to be the best that we can be, and then also we want to play against opponents while they're at their best, right? Like unless you're like in a tournament and then it's like, there might be something on the line and you're like, well, my opponent made a misplay, I'm going to, take advantage of that. In casual games, like think of if you're doing like tournament testing or something, do you want to be testing against someone who's making like the wrong play? Like, no, it's going to be the best quality testing is going to be when, you're playing against someone who's playing their deck at the best of their ability. And you're getting like legitimate kind of good data points, right? It's not, it can be like, someone played or did the wrong thing and, I just got to win. Is that really, would you have won normally? Probably not. So, encourage people to take back things and, you shouldn't, if someone points a removal spell at something, be like, oh, by the way, just so you know, like this is how they win, or this is blah, blah, blah. And don't, confuse, and this is something you have to really learn to kind of compartmentalize, is the politicking that you do in like a tournament, being like, here's what like, oh, you should be doing this because that he's clearly a threat and blah blah blah, where you've got your own agenda, and I'm putting on my like, I know the format, I know CDH, I know this guy's deck, I'm going to put on my teacher hat and be like, okay, so this is the best target right now. I'm actually the threat right now. You should be hitting something of mine, and really, just be honest with people. You don't want. It can be very intimidating to go into a pod and everyone is just full on cutthroat. Mm-hmm. And then also just pro social habits. Buy people snacks, bring snacks, buy people drinks.
Be the Dave.
Bribe people until you bring. Everyone needs a Dave in their
because
group,
instead of making the PayPal joke, you can then instead of having it be a joke, you can actually pay them off immediately with snacks.
Yeah, exactly.
I will give you 3 cookies right now if you go kill the other person at the table.
Also, whenever anyone's curious about CDH, you do get to make the join the dark side.
Oh, we have cookies.
Yeah. Okay. Reed, pick our next category.
Yes. Next category. All right. I think the one of the big ones as well is like it's sort of like generally inside of the it's sort of in the like LGS CDH playgroup consciousness anyway, I feel like. But it's just shuffling pods relatively consistently when you're at an LGS, or when you're playing with a playgroup. If you have like 2 pods going, just make sure that people aren't just like always playing with the same people, because you just you want to have people play with a variety of different people and decks, and you don't want to you sort of want to avoid cliquiness is like really not that much of an issue, I feel like, inside of CDH playgroups. In my experience, like they're just generally, first of all, like the weekly play groups just don't get large enough for the most part for that to actually be an issue, but you just like sort of don't want to even get close to that being an issue anyway. So just make sure you're shuffling pods. You can always curate pods as well if you think that it's just going to give better experiences. Like maybe be like maybe if we put like all of these decks in the same pod, it's like just not going to be a good time for anybody. You guys can all like play that if you want, but like maybe we can just like shuffle around a bit and make it like more enjoyable for everybody involved. Just make sure that it's not just like always the same people playing all the time.
You got to be the Mad Hatter. Change places. Yeah, just get everyone up and moving, and then it's a great way to kind of, especially with someone new. I guess there is some benefit to being like, if someone is brand new, like let them kind of get familiar with some people, but definitely mix it around so then everyone gets to know everyone else within that group. It really is good for building a strong community.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll do this one, which I think is kind of just maybe the most. Yeah, okay. It's hard to say the most important because I feel like good attitude is probably the most important. But reduce barriers to entry. So the CDH community's general kind of like stances on things, pro proxy is something that is very good for reducing the barrier to entry, especially when CDH decks can just be insanely cost prohibitive. But encouraging people to proxy, directing people towards CDH resources, it can be a bit disorienting to come into this. As much as we try as a community to provide resources and guide people to whatever they're trying to find, it's a lot to kind of do on your own, where you're like, let me get interested in CDH. Well, where do I even start? Do I start on the subreddit? Do I start on some Facebook group? Do I just go to what Discord do I go to of the hundreds that there are, right? So if you know how to navigate the CDH online community, you can kind of be a guide. You can direct people. You can be like, hey, actually, there's so many different kinds of decks in CDH. What interests you? Oh, I don't even know what deck commanders might be CDH. Okay, well, here's the deck list database. Here's a list. It's not comprehensive, but it's certainly a list of a bunch of different commanders. If any of these pique your interest, just let me know. Okay, oh, maybe this one. Oh, here, let me direct you to the. I'll send you an invite link for that Discord server. Here's a good list that I know is really good with a good primer. Like just directing people like that. Being proxy friendly. And then this is one that's, I think pretty important as well, is just having spare decks ready. Because you can make the sale, right? You can get someone interested in CDH. They're walking by at the LGS. They come by, sit at your table, you're talking to them, and then they're like, "Oh man, I want to give this a try." Instead of having to be like, "Well, okay, here's some lists and go proxy up something, go cut out all these sheets of paper, go sleeve up this deck." That's a lot of work for someone, and maybe they were interested, but if they have to do all of this work, you might lose them. So if you just have a spare deck ready that's very easy to explain and understand, like a very new player friendly deck, you can get them going right away. And then if they get a feel for it and they really like it, then you can be like, hey, is there anything that you want to build? Let me help you find a deck that's different. Or maybe they're fine playing that same deck for a while until, like everyone, they get that itch to spice it up and get something that's like really their own. So yeah, just in terms of decks, there's that, and then there's a couple others, which is especially if you have a fairly small number of people. Once you get to that first point where you can get a consistent pod launching, if it's every week, every month, whatever at your LGS, that's a huge point. Like that's really the kind of like base level. But as you start building, it's not like you go from 4 people to 8 people, right? You're going to have 4 people, then 5 people, then 6 people. And it's no fun. I mean, it can be fun to sit and watch games of CDH, but you should be, especially for new players, you should be willing to be like, hey, I'm gonna sit out this game, you guys play, right? Make sure everyone's getting their turn. And then, also with that, I mean, everyone has the preference for 4-player CDH, right? 5-player and 3-player is a bit, it can be a bit awkward, but I mean, I've played 3-player CDH. You guys have as well. I've played more 3-player than 5-player, but be willing to play with a bit of, funny pod numbers. It's done all the time in casual, right? People do 5-player games, 3-player games, just to be more, like literally inclusive. So you don't have someone sitting out at the sidelines, right? So long as people are playing, it's, 4-player CDH, that's optimal. But what's better than not playing CDH? Maybe 3-player CDH, right? Like instead of sitting out and watching, you can get a pot of 3 going. So yeah, that's my piece on this. If you guys have anything to add.
No, yeah, I mean it's just being a generous host, right? Mm-hmm. Is sort of the idea. Is just be willing to make a couple of sacrifices at least in the beginning, just to curate again good play group, healthy play environment, and then it'll pay off later. Trust.
Yeah, take the internet startup model where you operate at a loss for.
Yeah,
exactly.
And then you capture the market, and then
oh my god, that's actually perfect.
And then you jack up prices, and then you just completely inshitify Everweight.
Okay, Morgan, what do you have next?
I think the next thing is generating awareness, because people need to actually be able to find you, and know where to go, when to go there, what to expect. So there's often stores will have social media pages. You can talk to someone at the store and be like, hey, we're trying to get this group going. Maybe work with them. You don't even have to, like, some stores will, offer to do like prizes and entry fees and stuff like that. You don't even have to do that, but even just like, if the store puts it on their calendar, like, hey, there's CDH on Thursday nights, then anyone who's like looking around can know it. You can create a group for CDH in your area. If your LGS has a Discord server, you can do that. But just, have as many ways as possible to be discoverable.
Yeah, and also I think like that is really good for bringing people in general. But then once you've got people in the door, it can be great to like make a get each other's contact information. Maybe not everyone is on Discord, so try and meet people where they are, right? Maybe people are on Facebook, so it's Facebook groups, that you make a group chat, or you get, someone's cell phone number or something, so you can text them and be like, oh, hey, you going to the LGS tonight? Oh, no, I can't this week, but, next week for sure, something like that. So, you can coordinate and, get that, get like consistent meetings and make sure that, you just don't want someone to be like, hey, I showed up to the LGS and, you were supposed to be there and then you weren't, you want to make sure that people are aware that, if pods aren't going to fire, you want to make sure that expectations are being met, or if they're not, you're letting people know. Reed, your turn.
Well, I'm not sure this is we just sort of talk about this in general. I think probably what a lot of people want to end up doing with a local play group at sort of, or like sort of the end goal is potentially like running some tournaments. It's a pretty big deal, especially right now in the CDH community, and I think it's very reasonable to want to run like, you know, a tournament or maybe like at least just a local league. And I think it's really just a sort of a combination of a couple of things. So I think first of all, you definitely have to build up a play group ahead of time. Or you probably should build up a local play group ahead of time. At least get enough people together that, you know, there's at least a general interest that you can start pulling together. And then usually what ends up happening is you'll need to have an existing relationship with a store owner in the area or somebody who like has a space to actually run the tournament. And this, again, isn't like, oh, you have to be well connected in the local Magic community before going through like community building or anything, or like getting a play group together. But like, you know, just, you know, get to know the owners of the LGSs in your area or the LGS that you play at, and just, you know, talk about them. Let them know that, like, you know, maybe you want to run a tournament at some point and see if they have anything to add to it, right? Or if they are interested at all. And then even then, like, even if you can't necessarily do that, or, you know, you don't have a great relationship with the LGS owner or anything like that, you can always just, you know, run a low stakes tournament on your own, or like some leagues or stuff. And you know, you can remember that you don't always have to have massive prize support for a tournament to run, or like, you know, a lot of the big local tournaments that you hear about. I was about to say, like, you hear a lot about like the big local tournaments running like, oh, there's like a duel, like two duels for first and like a duel for everybody in the top four. And it's like, no, you can just like run a tournament where the prize is like $20 for winning it or whatever, right? Or just like bragging rights even. Or even just like run a low commitment league where it's like, you know, everybody chips in like $5 or whatever, and then somebody gets a like half a box or like a bunch of packs for winning a league, right? Like that's totally fine.
I'm pretty sure.
Remember when it was like, oh wow, this tournament has a prize of a duel. That's like insane. That's like the biggest CDH tournament ever. And then now it's like you just hear about all these duel tournaments all the time. It really is like you don't need to have that. Like, yeah, you can have really low stakes. People just want an excuse to be, you know, a bit competitive.
I mean, honestly, not strictly relevant to the point. I don't understand how stores run like 30-person duel events. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
The math ain't mathing on that one, but
yeah. Yeah, and I think the one of the last points here, and that I'll get is consistency. So you get things started, you know, you've generated interest. You gotta make sure that it's, you know, something that's happening at least semi-regularly. And you know, it used to be, you know, when we were in school, that we'd have, you know, weekly or bi-weekly meetings, and, you know, we'd get to do it that frequently. But, you know, as people get older, and, you know, everyone's on different schedules, because, you know, like, again, Magic is, I guess when you're in university, everyone's kind of in the same position, same age range. But, you know, once you get to the LGS level, it's there's people of all different ages who play, all different demographics, all different backgrounds, different jobs, and people have different schedules. So it could be hard to consistently coordinate something. But the key is that it is consistent. It doesn't have to be a, you know, weekly thing. Maybe it's every other week. Maybe it's once a month. But if you set a day and time for it, and then it's known in advance, it lets people plan around that, right? And then you can actually get all those people, because it's, you know, maybe you have a local group of 10 people who are into CDH, but if it's always sporadic, it's like, oh, hey, day of, hey, anyone want to meet for CDH? It's like, I got plans, I can't do this. And then maybe you're only getting 3 out of the 10 people. But if you're giving people enough heads up, like enough lead time, then, you know, they can really they can really try and accommodate that. The other thing I'd say with this is, like, if you're trying to pick a day to do it, a good day is your LGS's EDH night, because if you're trying to get people interested in the format, your target demographic is going to be people who are already playing EDH and who are already familiar. There's not many people, although we do know of some who go straight from Magic into CDH. Shout out Steve. But because that is probably like one of the hardest formats to just get into as like your starting format of Magic, and we've talked about that a lot before. But yeah, like if you're trying to, do all of these things that we've talked about, have someone walk by and, get them to sit down and eventually play a game, maybe find out what nights your LGS is doing EDH at, and then, kind of build around that. Yeah.
And
I think that's,
go ahead.
I
think like just one thing to like really stress is like meeting failures will, I think, precipitate, less investment, which will precipitate more failures. So, whatever works for like making sure it can happen when you say it's going to happen. If that's make it maybe a slightly, it could be make it longer and less frequently, like pick like a weekend day every, couple weeks or every few weeks. Or it could be like, oh, well, I mean, yeah, obviously doing it at your store's EDH night means that there's, like, your failure base is, like, reduced, where you just go play, like, casual EDH, or try and rope some casuals into playing CEDH. But if you're, like, trying to meet 3 times a week, then everyone will have very little investment in any given meeting, so like you'll never really know, okay, how many people are actually showing up. So just make something that's sustainable, I guess is the key word, because if someone shows up once and maybe someone new shows up and it's like, oh, there's only 2 people here, they're probably just not gonna try again, or they might not. So.
Yeah, I was gonna say the kind of to Morgan's point, there's everyone's kind of planned events or tried to plan events with like their friend groups or something, and it's like, hey, is anyone free on this day to do this? And it's like that how you phrase that can be very impactful on whether or not something happens. So it's like, oh, I want to go see this new movie. Anyone want to see this new movie with me? Okay, when are people free? Blah, blah, blah. And it can, the more questions people have to ask, because a lot of people will just wait and be like, hey, like, I need to see that a bunch of people are doing it and confirm to do it before I'll even do it, right? Before I'll jump in. So one thing you can do is like, hey, everyone, I'm going to be at the LGS on this day to play CDH, anyone who shows up, we can jam, right? Like, be the person who's putting yourself out there, not being like, hey, I'll be there if like enough people show up. Just be like, I'm going to be there. I'm going to be doing this. If people want to come, that's great. So like, just kind of guarantee it almost, put yourself out on a limb and just be like, hey, I'm going to be there. I'm going to be doing this. Come if you want. Like, I think that's a very small, subtle thing you can do, and that will help things go more smoothly, honestly, and get more participation. But yeah, I think that's we've covered a lot of really good advice. I think I'm kind of said my piece. Do you guys have anything you want to add before we wrap this up?
No, I think we have pretty good coverage.
Yeah, that.
Okay, actually, one thing I'll add is I hope our listeners and some people in our community actually do put this stuff into practice and try and grow their community. And if they are, I want to hear about it in the Discord, please. Like, let's, maybe people have other things they want to add that we didn't cover that is good advice, because we're all trying to actively do this ourselves and implement this like right now in our own local game scenes. So I know for a fact that some people in my local community are going to be listening to this episode. Hey, Alex, shout out. But a lot of this is stuff that is also kind of like aspirational. I know I could be certainly a bit better with doing being a bit more consistent, and I'm trying to get the ball rolling on maybe consistent CDH nights, programming for that or tournaments. So definitely, if any of our listeners have advice that they think is very useful, and I'd love to hear it. I'd love to hear it so that I can put it into practice as well.
Oh, and also make sure to recommend everyone listens to.
Yeah, that.
Yeah, that's the most important way to build a community, is that actually you have to listen to this podcast. Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Have discussion groups around the latest episode. Just get people engaged.
Oh, that's great. Okay, I think that wraps it up for our main topic, which means it's time for everyone's favorite segment, Gut Check.
Gut check.
Gotcha.
Woo. Okay, this week's Gut Check comes to us from Morgan. Morgan, what do we got going on?
All right. I honestly, we might have done this one before, but I feel like if we have, it's something that changes over time. What is the cheapest WotC could print without destroying the format? A sorcery that just says you win the game.
Oh yeah, because I know we've had this discussion before. I'm not sure that it's been a gut check.
CMC.
Yeah, it's gotta be like 6.
But CMC
you can
colors
play with
factored in
symbols,
colors
too.
as well. Yeah,
You can play with symbols. I mean, I don't know. Maybe we can argue that a 5-pipped 5-cost card is harder to cast than 4.
I was about to say, I think I think white is probably.
Wait, sorry, quadruple white or 5 white?
Quintuple white.
I think you could probably do quadruple white.
Maybe blue, although that gets sketchy with stuff like Urza.
No, I think quadruple blue is. I think you have to go quintuple blue. But I think if you're but
also blue is you can actually tutor for it, and if it's a sorcery, you can actually tutor for it in blue. Whereas in white both doesn't make white mana that well, and can't actually find it.
Well, could you do quadruple colorless pips? Not generic.
No, sorry. You can't do white because Bring to Light exists. Or sorry, you can't do 5 because Bring to Light exists. With color pips, I don't think.
I don't think that's that big of a. No, I think if
I suppose if you wanted to add
Bring to Light,
restrictions to on cast.
If you wanted to add if you cast it from your hand and paid its mana cost. Yeah, let's say that you have to pay its mana cost. No, let's just say you have to pay its mana cost.
Pay its mana cost.
I think quadruple. I think you do quadruple white. I think you'd also do quadruple colorless pips, not generic pips.
It costs white, and it says if white was spent to cast this, you win the game.
Could you do that in red?
No, because it's stuff like Seething Song and stuff. It's just too easy. It's too trivial.
Song.
It's too trivial to that's why black and red or black, red, and green are the ones where you just can't color pit balance it.
Yeah.
Because it's just too easy to filter the mana.
I think blue also is very similar because it's blue, mono blue, or it's quite easy to. Lots of decks want to have blue mana, so
okay,
it's not.
Wait, could it be something like red, green?
No, I'm gonna lock it in at quintuple white for my answer. I think.
I think I'm locking it at quadruple white or quadruple colorless pip.
Does I guess we didn't really. I think it could cost 3 white.
So for 6?
Six?
But 3 generic.
Yeah.
Actually, okay, this is kind of an interesting side gut check. Is like, is Morgan's like the lowest barrier to entry? Or like is quadruple? So because I said it could be either quadruple colorless or quadruple white.
It's certainly
is
easier to cast than quintuple white. I don't know about.
Yes, yeah, for sure. It's kind of interesting. It's very interesting comparing like what is equivalent mana cost in terms of like CMC and then pips. I wonder if the designers
because it also depends. It also depends on the format too, right?
Yeah.
Is the big thing. Like they're again older formats, like newer formats. Green is by far the easiest to make the most mana of. I'm pretty sure, just like broadly, because that's like the color that actually gets like dorks. In older formats, it's like black or like potentially red, depending on like how the deck's built.
I'm actually going to change. I think for colorless, it actually have to be 5 colorless pips, and then but you could do 4 white, or let's say like the 4 white pips. Because I'm thinking about colorless. I was thinking about it in terms of like I've been playing with Magar, the Eldrazi card that has like 3 like colorless pips, and those are so freaking annoying to cast if you're ever casting it, but.
Well, because you also just don't
prohibitively
play that much colorless producing, right? Like if this was a primary win condition in your deck, I would imagine
you could very easily tune with like Pain Lands and Ancient Tomb, and then over your Soul Ring. And
just like Mana Vaults.
Yeah,
and stuff,
exactly.
Yeah.
That's why I'm thinking like maybe if it was 5 of those colorless pips, but I think 4.
Like you might even just like chuck a Thran Dynamo in the deck as well, where it's just like we're just gonna like chuck in just some stuff that's sort of like roughly playable, but like makes a lot more sense if I'm trying to like cast a huge amount of colorless.
Yeah. Do you think WotC has like an internal formula or like a rough guideline for?
Well, also no, because colorless is so much worse as well. Because then you start like encouraging people to play like Ancient Tomb and City of Traders and like the colorless like ramp lands and stuff like that, and it's just like I feel like that goes off the rails pretty quickly.
Dude, freaking Crystal Vein.
Yeah, like unironically, like you just chuck a couple of them.
No, fucking what's the Lotus land? Scorched Ruins?
Scorched Ruins, yeah.
Insta win.
That's why you can't do the 4 colorless pips. You just crop rod for Scorched Ruins.
You just make it an artifact with colorless pips, right? What could go wrong?
Yeah, surely.
Okay. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode. If you guys would like to reach out to us with any questions, comments, or concerns, you can contact us on Twitter at Into the North Pod, via our email, intothenorthpodcast@gmail.com, or on our Discord server, the invite link for which can be found in the description for this episode. An extra special thanks to all of our patrons who help cover the expenses for our show and allow us to work towards improving the quality of the podcast. If you too would like to become a patron, we are at patreon.com/northpodcast. Thank you as always to the band Vox Cadre for our lovely podcast music, and to Nate Slubber for our equally lovely podcast logo. Next episode will be out in 2 weeks. Until then, see ya.
See ya.